So it's been a minute, but I figured I might get back into the Commodore. I've been doing some work on the XM and the International and a few other things, but I figured it's time to do a bit more on this. Where I left it off last time, it was on the hoist, but I moved it over here. I got the majority of the body, not any of the bolt-ons, but the majority of the body into epoxy after taking it back to bare metal. So if you haven't seen those videos, that was basically one video, then go back and have a look, see how I did that. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I'm Todd. This is a really good body. I'll flip the camera around. So it's an excellent body. I won't cover all that again, but what I do know is that it's got some spots of rust, some little holes here in the windscreen channel, and the same in the rear window. So just here and just here. And when I did it in epoxy, I intentionally just masked over those areas and left them raw so that I didn't have to grind it off again. And as you can see, it's I don't know, a couple of months, I guess, if that. And like, there's a heavy surface rust on here. It's a very humid climate here where I am, and stuff surface rusts up quickly. So that was why I got it into epoxy within a day or two of getting it to bare metal. I'd love to be in a climate where I could just leave things sitting around in bare metal, but that ain't the case. Today, I think I'm going to have a look at this. So I'm going to bare metal this back without taking too much metal off. So I'll just sand it up just to get it shiny. I'll chuck a torch in, or a light in underneath, because I can get in under here and shine light, and that'll help me. But also once I do clean it up, it'll be more evident. When I did, it sort of seems pointless now, but when I did clean this up, I put some rust converter on those spots. So again, seems pointless because it's all rusty. And then I'll do the same here. Now I think I'm just going to go through and weld up the individual holes. I didn't see anything that was large or of concern. So yeah, I think this is sort of the biggest thing. But what I am going to do is I'll clean it up, and then I'll go through with my die grinder, and I'll just enlarge, because there's some spots here which you can't really see, which I'll just check out, because if it's thin just close by, then I'll make it bigger than what it is at the moment. Try and get rid of that creeping rust. And then I'll make the decision to either just weld them up, or whether I'll make some profile like this. It's got a curve to it, but if I can just make a bit of a profile like this somehow, whether it's just by beating it over some round bar or trying to use my bead roller or whatever, and I may weld in small patches. So we'll see. First things first, we'll clean it up. I'm going to be using these strip discs on my angle die grinder. They're Roloc, so they just screw on. So if you haven't got one of these, they're very handy. These are 2-inch, so 50mm. You can also get them in 75mm, and you can get this sort of disc on your grinder and for drills and all sorts of things. But I'll be giving this a go because it's small, compact, and these aren't terribly aggressive. They remove paint well, so it should just bring it up to a nice shiny metal without taking too much metal off. That's better. So got that all exposed, and as you can see, you may be able to see just there and there some light. I've got a torch in under there, some light coming through, so that's obviously pinholes, but you can also see all these other spots through here. So all of this needs something done with it. So I'll go through and I'll carefully grind back to bare metal, and then I can make a decision about just how much I need to replace, or whether I need to weld it. So things like this, for example, once I get in there with a little die grinder, I might just end up punching a hole through there. Once I punch that hole, I might decide that it's okay to weld, or I might decide that I need to replace a section. So when you look from here through to here, for example, that area through there may need replacing. So I'll go in slowly and make my decision based on what I find. Well, I have to say I'm impressed. So I will go over this with probably the strip disc again, or maybe even a light grit Roloc, just paper, sandpaper. But we knew there was 2 holes here. I can't remember which 2 it was. And I found a 3rd one. What I did in the first place, I went in with a sharp die grinder bit, and I just got these bits and I just stuck it there, and if it went through, it went through. And I did that to every spot that I found. And that was the only 3 spots where I was able to actually put it in there. So then I changed the die grinder tip out for a blunter one, as in not as pointy, still sharp, but you can see it's sort of got a rounded bit on it. Whereas the one that I was using in the first place was that one there. So nice and sharp, went straight into the hole, and if it went in, I just kept going until I ground out to clean metal. So I've gone right the way across here, and I've intentionally tried to just attack everything. I think, no, it's just a shadow. So there might be a tiny few little spots there that I've still got some rust, but what I'm going to do is go through, again with the strip disc, as I said, and clean it up. But I cannot tell you how happy I am with that. If I have any concerns, which I don't think I do, but where I've gone through and created some little divots, for example, by just cleaning it out. If I wanted to, I could just tack some spots and weld there, and then just grind it off to fill it. But I don't think I'm going to. I really don't think it's worth the effort. I don't think it's going to help. I just want to say, while I think of it, I had a number of people make comments, like a lot of people make comments about this car, and wishing me luck with it, and people sending me advice, things like, and I'm sorry, I can't remember everyone's names, but people telling me that I probably need to check inside here because they tend to rust from the inside out. And then one guy suggested that to block it up at a point down the bottom somewhere and fill it with fish oil, absolutely flood it. So I'll go through and I'll check all that sort of stuff out, whether it's fish oil, whether I do that, or whether I use some sort of wax in there, cavity wax. I'll definitely be taking your advice. I've said before, I don't really know that much about Commodores. Oh, and the amount of advice people gave me about the hinge pins. Oh, wow. So wasn't just me. There's special tools. People mention techniques and so on. Really, really appreciate that. Seriously. Your wealth of knowledge will make my job easier. If you know stuff about these and you think I need to look at stuff, do things, special tools, whatever, please tell me. I don't need to make life any harder for myself than it is. Back to this. So I'll give this a clean up, and then I think I'll move to the back and clean the back up. I didn't want to do the back straight away because life gets in the way sometimes. You make a start and then you have to walk away, and I didn't really see much point cleaning this up and then having to walk away from it and go rusty again. But progress is good. So I'm going to put 0.6mm wire in my welder for this. I normally use 0.8 for just about everything, but I'll put 0.6 because you can melt it with a lot lower heat. Not this is an area that I think distortion is going to be a problem because there's so many contours here, but I don't need distortion in my windscreen seal. I probably don't need to explain why. And I will get into that. Actually, just while I think of it, while I was back here, someone pointed out to me that This is apparently a VK Calais boot, and it's obvious it's had a wing on it. So I'm not really sure exactly how the person knew that. I guess it's something to do with the holes. They did mention about having to fill some holes in. And old mate that I bought the car off, actually not the back, old mate that I bought the car off, he was supposed to be replacing the apron for me. That was part of the deal, and I don't think he's coming through. So thanks for that, Jason. Appreciate the follow up on that, mate. You know, you take someone for their word. Anyway, enough on that. I'm not going to have a whinge. But I'll probably replace the front apron if I can get one. If not, I'll take it off and try and panel beat it. I've decided here, I've been trying to chase these up. You Commodore guys will probably know it's a bit of a common thing, they rust out, but a couple of people confirmed what I pretty much knew. That piece there is not factory. I would hope not. I'm going to cut the back of that out, I'll cut the boot out and I'll go there. So I'm just going to try and fabricate those panels myself. I've got some skills, so we'll see how good they are. If it doesn't work, I'll chase up some parts off, some cuts off cars. Again, if you're watching this, if you're one of the 5,000 people that have watched the video, wow, and you've got some decent sections for there and at the back there, let me know. Hit me up. I don't want to pay kidney money for them. I've had some people offer me them, and I don't mean to be tight, but I don't know. I don't need to sell an organ to buy a car part. If you got something you want to be decent about the price, then let me know. We'll see what we can do. Anyway, enough chitter chatter. Let's clean that up. I definitely cannot be disappointed with that. So this was my main concern, this spot here. I've cleaned all that up. Look, all I really need to do is prime it. I haven't got any primer at the moment, so I'll either wipe it down with some oil to stop it rusting up, or I'll just use some, I've got some aerosol red primer. And on this side I knew there was a hole here. Enlarged it, took it back. I think it's big enough. What can I say? What can I say? Very happy. Okay, welded up the back window easily enough. Just had to play around with my heat settings a little bit. I don't use 0.6 wire very much, so yeah, just had to adjust that. Got to weld these three up, and I've got that, I think it's bronze or brass. I don't think it's copper. I think it's a bit harder than copper, but whatever. I'm just using that to put in behind the holes so that I am not trying to weld into the air. I could just dab around the sides, which is what I normally do, but if I just hold that there, then it means that I won't have all weld hanging out the back of the hole. So it'll just make it a little bit neater, so I can't really get in there to grind it up very well later on. So I'm just going to go along and weld each of those. I'm not particularly concerned about pumping some heat into there for the reason that I explained before. There's quite a few body contour lines there, so warping and distortion shouldn't be too much of an issue. Having said that, I'll do one, leave it for a little bit, do the next, and so on, so that I don't just go cooking the whole area. That's what I'm about to do. Okay, those holes are gone. So it was in this area here. These here look worse than they are on the video. They look worse on the video than what they are. It's just some pitting from where that previous rust was. I burnt through in a couple of spots because it was a little bit thin around the perimeter, which is fine. I just kept chasing it and burning it out. If it was thin, I was happy to burn it out and replace it with new metal. So I actually loaded it up with a fair bit of metal, changed my welding settings again. I sped the wire feed up a little bit to prevent burning through too much. But I'm happy with the way that's come up. I just took it back with 36 grit, took the tops off it, just did the flat surface and then the flat surface, and then I just trimmed the shape up, put a light there, and I did find a few pinholes there. So I loaded that up with some hot metal and hot weld, and then just ground it off. Came up well. So I can't say that I could be any happier really, because I'm pretty impressed. So that's fixed. And if you're not familiar with where I am, I've got chickens and roosters and things, so you can hear my rooster in the background. Unfortunately, it's not Kev, my old rooster, because Kev and a few of my other chickens actually got taken by the neighbour's dog. So we have some new chickens. That's Fabio. Okay, well, I'm very happy with that. That is the rust around the windows. Now, once again, if you're familiar with Commodores, to be able to do that in a couple of hours, you'd have to be happy with that. I think what I might move on to next, I know it's not necessary, but I've masked these areas up just so I don't get red primer everywhere. I'll just try and keep it as neat as I can. So that's what I'm going to be putting on there. I'll sand it off later and I'll put it into epoxy. But as I said, I don't actually have any epoxy at the moment. I've got to do a restock. So same through here. I've just given it a mask and I've given it a clean with some glass cleaner. And then I've wiped it down with the obligatory Mambo dog fart t-shirt. So I'm probably showing my age, but I used to wear that Mambo shirt. And for those of you that are interested, I'm listening to Skyhooks Living in the 70s through Spotify. Through a streaming service at the moment. So yeah, showing my age, I guess. I guess just looking at me shows my age. Anyway, I'll throw some primer on this and then I'll get on to the next things. Got a couple of coats of that on there. That'll do the job. It'll keep it from rusting, surface rusting, until I get back to that part of the car. So I've decided what I'm going to do is cut that piece out. Not the back of the car, that dodgy rust repair, that piece there. I'm going to cut that out so I can see what's behind it, and then no doubt I'll cut out what's behind that, one step at a time. Let's see what's behind box A. Well, I reckon I could build a tank out of that. What is it called? Killdozer? Maybe I could build Kill Commodore. Okay, so there's a lot of weld here. I've just cut the plate rather than cut the weld because I just wanted to expose it. I don't know what the shape is supposed to be, but there is some contours here. Maybe it's supposed to have some dimples in it or something. I'm not sure, but I'll do a little bit of research. But I suspect what I'm going to do is make something that is a relatively flat panel. Maybe, I'll definitely put in this body line here. That's original metal, that's original. Got the boot floor coming through here. Now the boot floor I'm also going to be cutting out, because if you remember, or if you saw the earlier video, there's a repair in there with a new old stock part or a reproduction part or something, but it's done badly. So I'm going to be cutting it out as well. I'm pretty sure that the panel that's there is overlapped quite a bit on the old stuff. So what I'm hoping is that I can cut it out, trim it down to size. I'll still overlap it and I'll seam seal it and all that sort of stuff, rather than butt weld it. And I'm hoping that I can use that panel and put it back in there. But I'm pretty sure that part of what I'm looking at here is the back of that panel. So this is not as bad as I thought. I'll take it out to back here, obviously, and over the other side also, but it looks pretty repairable. I don't know, these things apparently rust out here. I cannot help but wonder whether this car towed a boat, maybe. Don't know. I'll keep cleaning this up. It's not too bad. It's the gift that keeps giving. That'll do, till I can get back to it. It's 1,000,000% better. And same at the back here, this bit, and over here, all in primer. Where we left off was cutting the back out of this. So what I've done is cut out the rubbish, and I've cut back as much as I can without going into the original metal too much. So what I can see is that there's obviously the outer skin. So you can see the tin worm here, and the same over the other side. And the piece that actually came out is obviously just the part through here. This is part of the boot interior. And through here there seems to be 3 layers, but I think there should only be 2. I think it should be the outer, the inner, which I suspect might have also connected to the floor. So I could be wrong, but I think there's only supposed to be 2 layers there. So once again, I'm going to cut this floor section out as carefully as I can to use as much of it as I can. There's a lot of weld there, and then there's some spots where there's no weld. So I'll cut that out, and that will reveal the big hole, and I'll do that as carefully as I can, because I want to try and make it so that I don't make a hole bigger than the piece I've got. But on the inside here, where's a good point of view? On the inside here, I've got to do something from here up to this point, and from over here, wherever I cut it, into the other side. Now, it looks like it was probably pretty flat. Probably had a few dimples in it or something. There's a little bit of a shape to it here. I really don't know what it's meant to look like, but I can imagine there's either carpet or an interior panel or both that go on there. And that will probably hide anything that goes there. So I think I can make a relatively flat panel, and I might put some sort of swaged line in it or something, just to give it a little bit of strength. And once again, across the back here, I'd like to keep as much of this as I can, so I might end up doing something like coming down through here or something and across here. I want to keep as much of the original shape as I can, so that it makes it easier for me and so that it looks as original as it can. It's a bit hard to know what it looked like originally because I haven't got it, but so same thing here, there's a little pinhole there, but other than that, looks not too bad. It's a little bit bent through here, it's had a little bit of a hit through here. There's a couple of little dents underneath, or larger sort of dents. I'll do what I can with those. And I think I'll make a panel that comes across here underneath that body line. So that's the interior, this is the exterior. So across there, down to here. Probably try and join it along this body line just here, so I can shape it. Rather than a flat part, might control distortion a bit, make it easier to shape up. It is behind the bumper bar, which is good. So I think I'll go through and I'll drill out some of these spot welds so that I can actually separate the layers and cut off the bits I don't want. But before I cut anything off, I might try and at least shape something up out of metal that's the sort of basic shape, and I can sit it there and then I can worry about fitting it perfectly after I've cut stuff off. Now we've got chainsaws in the background. Okay, so what you just saw me do was basically just template up essentially what became a rectangle. So I'm just going to make up a piece of metal, or cut out a piece of metal this shape just here, and then I will worry about putting some shape into it. But this should be enough surface area of metal to be able to do what I need to. I'll make it a little bit bigger so that I don't cut short, but that's what we got. So I've got this, that's 1.12 millimetre I think it is, sheet. It's got surface rust on it, but not to worry. So I think I use the factory edge. I'll just cut the whole side of it off because it looks like it's going to fit pretty well. So I don't even know if that sheet, that template that I've got is actually symmetrical. It might be wider at one end than the other, but I think what I'll do is I'll just cut it one standard width right the way through, the thicker end, which I think might be on the right hand side there. So I'll just cut that through straight, and then I'll start working it out from there. And 17 minutes later, that's why you don't let your sheet metal go rusty. Okay, let's try and fit it to the car. Well, let's try and put it to the car and get some shape into it. Righto, so the chainsaws are still burning in the background. On a good day you can hear 20 trees fall around here. Crazy about chainsaws. Okay, so I've got my piece of sheet metal, and what I need to do is get it to fit there. Now, it's not going to be flat, but I've made it so that it can go from about here to here, from about here down to here. Now, what I'm basing it on is this, that it's a relatively flat panel, so it's pretty flat along here, but then it sort of comes up here and kicks out a bit at the top, and it comes down and rolls around just here. So I'm going to work from this line just here and this line just here. Now I still have some metal under here for about 5 millimeters, so 1/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is this line that is through here, I'm going to use that as my base, and I'm going to come through here and carry it out on both sides to about there, where that chalk line is, and then I'm going to come down here. This is good metal, I don't need to do that. So this body line kicks in. So what I don't want to have to do is mess around with 3,000 different shapes. So if I keep it one straight line through here and then come down, then I can sort these shapes out here. So I want to get rid of all this boogerness, and the same over the other side. I'd like to leave as much of this dimple as I can. Actually, I'll probably bring it down this side. Leave as much of this as I can, as I said. And then I'll come down under this line here and across, down through here, and the same on the other side. So this body panel, it could be pretty much flat straight up and down, but more than likely it's got a little bit of a curve to it. And I know, I can tell just by looking at it. Where's my ruler? So this is straight. So I can tell just by looking at it that there is curvature. Let's take that magnet off it. There is curvature across the back there. There's quite a reasonable amount of curvature across the back there. I'm talking about around this way. So if I do that, you can see there's curvature there. Not many cars have flat panels, except for that Tesla thing, Cyberbus or whatever it's called. So that's got curve that way. So even though there's a dimple in it here, if I ran this across here as a straight line, it drops in here probably 15 mil. But when I sit that there and there, it nearly touches the middle. So this panel's got curvature through here, the whole thing's got curvature. Why does that matter? Because if I put a flat panel there, it's going to look silly and it's not going to fit properly. So I need to put some curvature into this. Now I could hold it and just make it so it's curved like that. Absolutely I could, and it would probably work. But I also think I'm going to want a little bit of curvature through this way. So while I'm no metal shaping expert, I do have an English word. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of a curvature through it this way, and a little bit through lengthways as well. And as I said, the lengthways one's pretty easy because I can just do that anyway. I might not even worry about that one. But I'm going to put that curvature into it first, and then I'm going to work out some shapes into it. And one of the first shapes I'm going to do is kick it out at the top here. Now I think I'm going to do that on my bead roller. I'll find an appropriate size die that works with this curvature, and I'll try and roll a bead that comes out this way on the top there, which will probably straighten the sheet back out, so I'll have to bend it again. So I think I'll do that one first, and then I'll worry about the other stuff. Let's see how that goes, eh? First things first, I'm not a sheet metal fabricator. I own a bead roller and I own an English wheel. Doesn't make me a sheet metal worker. Second thing, if you are a sheet metal worker, I know my wheels are disgusting. The other set of ones around the corner. They've got surface rust on them. I've given them a clean up. Guys, apparently this should be shiny and beautiful. Well, it is what it is, I'm sorry. What I need to do next is roll that shape into the top of the panel. So on this test panel here, I've rolled a shape with my bead roller, and that's to pick up the shape underneath this lip just here. So something like that, and then that will continue right the way across to the other side. So what I'm going to do is run the actual piece on my bead roller. So I have my able-bodied assistant here, Davina, to help me, but I can't film her because she's in her 90 and she doesn't want to be filmed. So I've got these wheels, dies on my bead roller, and this is about the curvature that I'm after. So I'm going to feed it through, and I'll run it through probably 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I'll keep pushing down on the outer edge to try and force that shape into it. And as I said, I've already put some curve into it. There's a little bit of a kink in it, but put that curve into it, and now when I put the die, put the bead on the edge of it, then hopefully it'll maintain that curved shape that I've put into it as well. So we'll see. took a little while. I actually thought that I had rolled it on the wrong edge in the first place because I had the curvature into it, and then when I went to hold it into place, it looked like I had done it on the wrong side. But what actually happened was, as I was bead rolling this in, it completely changed the banana from this way to that way. So I've had to manually bend it over my knee and so on. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. So it's still got some curvature that way. It's got some shape to it this way. What I've got here, I've just drawn some lines on here, and I'm going to try to reproduce some shape that's in it down here. So I'll probably end up making this back panel in about 3 pieces, I think. I just don't think it's worth trying to do it in one. But what we have down here is there is a swage line that comes through here. So it comes down, out, straight, back in again, and then curls around here. So my panel is going to go from here to here. But I'm going to, I think in the first place, run it across to about this point here. So there's some body lines that go through there, some body lines that go through there. I think that's where the bumper bar mounts probably go. This here, I'm not sure, it could just be for strength, I think. So I'm going to take the panel out to here, and I'll make this part separately. So I'll take it to here, down like that. So what I'm going to do is try and push this shape into it across the whole back there. It'll give it rigidity, and I guess it'll look factory. I actually don't know what it's meant to look like, but that'll do. As long as it's got that. It might have something else that comes up here, but to be honest, I don't really care. There'll be a bumper bar across here. A purist might care, and a panel beater might pick it up, but I'm not particularly fussed. So I've just got to work out the right dies for that on my bead roller and run it through, and hopefully I've got it in the right place. So I've got this tipping die and this one on it, whatever that's called, and I've just done a bit of a demo, and this here is what it's pushing out for me. So the tipping die is pushing down on that outer line, and it's leaving this profile here. So what I'm hoping, as long as I've got my spacing right, if I push the tipping die down on this line here and this line here, then it should leave this raised, or raise that up and push these down. So only one way to find out. So the profile looks pretty close. We'll see how I went with the spacing. I did check it after the first one, and it was maybe a mil or two out, but it's not going to matter because once I cut out the stuff that's there, you're not going to know that it was a mil or two out. It's only when I'm comparing it to what's there. So that makes that a very strong panel. So it's still got the curvature to it that I need. So I think with a bit of manipulation, it should be okay. I'll only be using, I'll be taking off roughly 100 mil or so off each end. So the leftover pieces I think I can use to shape those pockets for the tow bar brackets and so on. So they won't be wasted. So I'm pretty happy with that. And my motorised bead roller here has been great. Say hello to my motor. Hopefully you're going to be able to see the detail here. But this is this part that I was talking about. So let's see. So realistically, that should be able to tuck up into there, and I'm going to move that along to there, but this is what I'm trying to pick up. So I'll probably have to try and fabricate a corner to make it flow, but once I've pushed, bent, shoved, whatever, then this should work. I could, if I wished to, take this right the way through to there and just ignore the fact that that little corner was over there. I just need to finish it off somehow. So I'll have a play around with that. But the profile I think will work pretty well. So this is about where I'll be cutting it off here. But I think I will do a cut and butt there. So I'm going to have to manipulate the top here because the cut along here by myself and by the last person isn't dead straight. So I think what I'm going to have to do is shape the top of this as close as I can to the cut that's there, and hopefully that won't push it up too far. And then I'll go through and tack it, and I'll end up butt welding it along here. I'll do a cut and butt down here, I think, as long as I can get the metal from out of here. What a cut and butt is when you weld that there, when you put that there and you put some tack welds and then cut it, weld it, cut it, weld it, and then pull this piece out from behind so it doesn't remain in there, but it means that your cuts are perfectly lined up. Can't always do it, but hopefully I will be able to. As long as you can get access to it to remove the piece, should be okay. Like here, I don't think I can do a cut and butt just looking at it. I'll cross that bridge when I burn it down. So I'm happy with the way that's come up. I think once that's welded, body worked and all the rest of it, behind the bumper bar, it should look pretty good. All I've got to do is the easy stuff like weld it without distorting it and then grind it up so it's invisible. Perfect. Oh, and of course finish it. Righto, next step. Okay, so I've cut the panel down shorter and I've drawn some lines on this side and some lines on this side where I ultimately am going to be fitting it. And as I said, I'll make the ends up separately. And I've got a point here, just here, and just here, that I'm going to trim those sections out carefully because I don't want to lose too much metal, so that I can tuck the replacement panel up. Now I haven't really shown you closely under here, but this lip here, this is where I'm going to be welding onto. And the reason I'm going there is that it's underneath, it's sort of out of visibility, and I think I should be able to shape the weld pretty well once I get there. So let's put the camera back here. So this is going to sit like that. As I said, I'll sort out what I'm doing here, but this line will pretty much carry through there to be cut off. So the reason I need to cut the top out here, either cut the top out or cut some of this off, either. Just looking, I might actually cut the corner off this, retain some of the original metal there, just so I can get it up and in there, so I can close up that gap just there. So that's the plan. down. So I'm gradually creeping up on this by trimming it. So I've trimmed over this side, trimmed over this side, trimmed a bit of the corner out, same with the sheet metal. I've just marked a line across here, so what I'm going to do is take off all that part where the spot welds are. So I'll run a saw through here. It may just come apart because I don't think the boot floor is welded to it, or it may not. I am probably going to return my panel down here a little bit, but if I can get away with it on that line, then I will, because it'll be easier. But just creeping up onto it. So I've just been trimming little bits along here. As I said, I don't want to take too much off because I don't want to be welding air. Well, my camera eventually went flat yesterday, so new day today. Can't remember exactly where I got up to, but I've marked and cut these areas ready to make some new pieces, so I'll have to play around with that in a little while. And I also went through and cut the floor out. Okay, so I've made up a couple of these. I'm going to practice on this one, and if it works then great, but if it doesn't then it'll be the practice one and I'll make two out of this one. So this is the full size of it, and the smaller square on the inside is the part that's going to be sunken in, and this is about 10 mil. So I've just set up some dies on my bead roller, and that's as good as I can get it, and I think from there to there, once it's pressed, will be a bit wider than the 10 mil that I'm after. In fact, this is a sample just here, just that piece on the right hand side there. So I think I'm going to run with it. So I think what I'll do is, I don't mind if it's a little bit bigger, so I might go on the outside of the lines. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll do a test and we'll see. And that's why you do practice runs. So the very first bead that I rolled on the wrong line, so that's why it's got this crease just here. But really, the subsequent ones have done pretty much what I'm after. I need to not go right the way through to the end. I was just trying to see what the dimple comes out like. Let's just compare that to the car. Okay, so this has got nice rounded corners on here, because this would be a pressing, I would think, and they'd just stamp it out in one hit. So this is what I've got, as opposed to what's there. So I think it needs to be a bit deeper, but I can live with it otherwise. I think the size and the shape should be okay. Could probably make it a little bit bigger on the inside, I think. So I might just make it a little bit bigger on the inside, so therefore go further. I'll follow the black lines further outside, and that'll just push the whole thing out. And I reckon that should do the trick, but as I said, I will try and get it a bit deeper. Well, I'm definitely getting better. Is it good? No. Is it square? No. Is it better? Yes. So I changed my dies back around again. This one here, I'm going to make up some more plate and I'll mark it out again, and then I'll give it another go. I don't think I'm going to use this one. It's a bit out of shape, but I think I've learned some things from it. While it's supposed to have rounded corners, the square corners are easier for me to achieve. So look, I think it's okay. I'm still not convinced it's deep enough, but I'll keep playing. Okay, so hopefully, or you would hope that the second one had come out better than the first one, and I think it did. So that's the first one. That's the second one. So I think they'll do the job just fine. I was going to just cut out part of this and leave part of it behind, but because these are slightly different shape, slightly different size, slightly different profiles and so on, I'm just going to cut the whole thing out and I'll take it out to the flat area and weld it on. So literally just around there. And I've got enough that I can bring it across to here. This is where the larger panel comes to. So I've just left about a 20mm margin right the way around, just to give me enough to play with, and then I can cut that off when I don't need it. So the way I look at it, these pockets I think are a little bit deeper than what I've made, but all I can see that affecting is how far the bumper bar mounts away from the car. I think that's where the bumper bar mounts. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think it's going to make very much difference to anything, the fact that they're slightly different. So time to go to the next step. So in bits and bobs, this is what we're making. Okay, I thought I'd just pause that there for a minute. I'm sitting in the boot. This is why you cut the floor out. So I've cut out a bunch of metal, and I've left some flanges in areas where I think I can use them, bits of the floor where I think I'd prefer to leave it, and weld up where I cut through accidentally taking the pan out, and I'm grinding the welds off. So done around here, cut this bit out here, I'll probably patch that. I'll probably leave this bit in here, it'll be below the floor and it's above the rail on the other side. So just giving it all a clean up. So just to give you an idea, this weld is about 10 mil thick right the way around. A lot of it hasn't penetrated, some of it has, but there's a lot of weld there, and needless to say, there's a lot of grinding. That this is possibly the most fun I've ever had. Hang on, let me rephrase that. This is not fun. There's no fun in this at all. So I'm doing this for you. I hope you appreciate it. This is a horrible job. Well, I guess I better get back into it. Might just replace that flap disc. So I'm grinding it with a coarse flap disc. I think it's about a 40 grit or something. And I'm also using my cutting disc, and with that I'm sort of doing slots in it to get through it as well. It is what it is. It's just a horrible job. Well, as that caption says on a lot of videos, much, 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 much later. But it's looking pretty good. Haven't finished, but it's certainly looking a lot better than it did. This is the floor sitting in place, so this is what I'm talking about, some of those brackets and so on that need to be welded on. So I'll mark those areas where this bracket here needs to be welded on. And same over here for this little tray, I think it's a heat shield or something. It needs to get tacked on there, I've already cleaned that up. But this here, you can see the misalignment. The gap between here and here, that's the difference in the contour of the new floor and the old floor, because that's actually part of the old floor just there, so it's sitting up. So I've got a choice to make whether I cut this new floor back here somewhere so that it's only overhanging by maybe 20 mil and try and get it come in tighter, which is the way I'm thinking, or whether I just try and work with that as it is. Across the back here, that's all looking doable. And then I've got that rail there, so that's all good. That straighten it out a bit, but so I'll mark that, clean up, and I'll plug weld through there. So I'll drill holes and plug weld. I might come in from the top actually, so I need to mark out where they are. Drilling some holes from underneath might indicate that. Same over here, and you can see here where I've sort of neatened the cuts up. That's my finger. Where I've neatened the cuts up here around this area, and I've left a little lip there which is actually part of the floor, but it's a return from up the side here, so that I can spot into that as well. So it all seems to fit pretty well. It's just that front bit that I need to make a choice on. So I think I'll have a look at that. These are the various lines that I scratched underneath on the bottom. So this is the bottom of the floor pan, while I was under there, to show where things are. So this is that brace that I was just talking about. So this is the front of it. So I'm going to cut this off back here somewhere. So the easiest way to do that, I'll use my ruler. I think this will be more than I need, but I'd rather cut off too little than too much. So I'll just put that there. I'll cut off on this side. I'll put a scratch mark there and cut off there, and it'll remove. Okay, good thing I'm talking about this, because this is the wrong end of the boot. It's actually that end. Let's try that again. So this end, so this is the front of the brace. There's some holes that I drilled earlier so that I could see from when I was up. So I drilled them from underneath so I could see where they were in regards to the floor. So yeah, this is the line here. So all this dust is playing havoc with my nose. So this is all the various marks that I put for the braces and all that sort of stuff, and where things need to be welded on, where some other things need to be welded on over here. So once again, I'm going to put the ruler down, and I'll probably cut it just about here, because I reckon where it changes direction is where the problem is. So I'm pretty sure I can afford to take it right the way off through there without any drama. So let's do that. Okay, another new day. It's been a beautiful day here. It's been pretty warm. I think it's about 28, 29 degrees. So I've been out doing some yard work, looking after the goats and the chickens, and doing some fencing and a bit of landscaping, a bit of everything really. But now I'm in here. So the Commodore, where we left off, I was playing around with the floor, and I got that pretty much where I'm happy with it. So I decided I would have a look at this panel here, this part that's missing. So I wasn't sure exactly what shape it was meant to be, but I presumed it had some of this sort of gear going in it. So this part on the bottom I'm talking about. So I presumed it had some swages and maybe some access holes and so on. I still don't know, but what I saw was for sale from a company, infill pieces that you can fill all these holes in. So they're pre-cut and you can weld them in. That's low fabrications. I presume anyone that's got a Commodore knows of low fabrications. I think it's Chubby Low. So the reason I mention that is that it sort of tells me that if you can buy things to fill these holes in, I think that'd be welded in, then I should be able to fill them in. Now I know that there's some wiring that needs accessed for the tail lights and stuff. So I think what I'm going to do, I'll leave the top holes available, and there's some little holes in various spots here, which I presume are for trim clips. Now, just to be clear, I might end up going afterwards, after I go to put this thing together, going, oh, what have I done? But I'll find that out then. So what I'm going to do, there's a black line that I've drawn on here, up to here, and across there, same across, right the way across. I'm actually going to replace where those three holes are and the piece below it. Now the reason being is that I was going to weld a new piece onto here and join it up, but it's got dimples in it and so on. Well, there's not much going on, but there's a little bit. And I figured, well, if I don't need the holes there, well, I'm going to assume I don't need the holes, I might as well just replace the whole part. So I'm going to be cutting a piece of metal that's about 210 mil deep from here, and I'll show you what I'm doing on the bottom there, and from this point across to the other side. Now I'm just going to go to here. I may lap it. I think because it's the boot, I may just cut out some of the messiness and then just go over the top of what's there and weld it in. Maybe even just spot weld it, we'll see, rather than full weld it. And on the back here, again, I'm not sure exactly how it's supposed to be, but what I'm going to be doing, as I said, I'm going to be coming down from here, well, above here, but from here down, we've got to go in between this part here and the boot floor, and we're going to come down, and I'm going to return it back under the boot floor with a bit of a lip, so that essentially it'll just come through. I'll try and, this is quite rounded, this area here. It's probably supposed to have a squarer shoulder, but it is what it is. So I'm going to bring it down and try and bring it under that to support the floor, but also so that I can come through and I can plug weld what would have been spot welds in from this side into the piece that's coming down across the back. So it'll come down like that and around. I'll join the floor into it, so it'll support the back of the floor and it'll infill that area. And then I can put that first piece that I fabricated in and the piece for these pockets over here. On the back of all this business, there is the other side of those pockets, and I've cut through them when I was cutting the tin worm out from the other side, from this side. I will probably, I'm not sure, I may weld my new piece across here and down like that and reuse these existing dimples, or I may go straight over the top of it and just create new dimples. But I think I'll probably make my piece so that it comes down like this, across and like that, and just weld this back up again. We'll see. I think that's a plan. It should be a pretty straightforward piece. I think it's about 1 metre long. Well, it is exactly a metre long and 210 deep, and it should be a pretty straightforward thing. So I'll cut that, I'll prep it, and then I think I can go straight ahead and weld that piece in, and then I can start assembling the boot floor. I think I'll do it first, like after that piece. So I'll do this piece, then the boot floor, and then I'll start reconstructing the back bit. This is going to be the most visible part. It is behind the bumper bar, but it will be the most visible part. It's outside of the car, so it'll take a little more finessing. As I said, it is curved and it's got these dimples, so I'm going to have to take my time and just make sure I don't go making a mess of it. So I guess enough chatting. I might do it, eh? I've worked out that I need 195mm from the top of my plate down to where I'm going to bend it and put a flange on it. So I've just put a mark on either end. I'm going to just draw a line there. But what I've got is, I've got that lintel, that thick piece of steel underneath it. And then once I'm ready, I'm going to clamp another piece of steel, in this case a piece of angle iron. I'm going to clamp it on top of where I want to fold it, and then I'm going to go along gradually with a hammer and manually break it, so manually bend it. So that's what I'm setting up there. Well, that came out quite well. So again, just used a nylon hammer. You can use pretty much anything. You could use a rubber hammer, I guess. You could use a ball peen hammer, just a normal hammer, claw hammer if you wanted. But I've got that, so I find that spreads the load and it doesn't dent it all up. But I worked along and then back and long and back, not trying to do it all in one hit because that will kink it. Whereas if you do it gradually, it just shifts the metal gradually. So it's got a couple of little dents in it here, which I'll bang out. But realistically, that part goes underneath the floor. So this is the back. This is that lip that'll go underneath the boot floor. It'll give some points to spot weld to. And it also, just breaking it like that, gives it a heap of strength. Now, the back of the car, as we've already seen, has got a curve in it. So I need to get a gentle curve in this. And if it was just flat metal, that wouldn't be too much of a drama. But now that I've got this flange on it, this lip, I need to shrink it in the middle a bit. So what I'm going to do is I've got a shrink a stretcher. I'm just going to give it a couple of hits with that and put a little bit of curvature in it. Shouldn't be very hard at all. So let's move over to that and get a bit of a curvature happening this way. So a shrink a stretcher. This one here, if I put a piece of metal in here and push this handle down, where's the camera facing? And push this handle down, then what it would do, it would actually get the metal and it would rip it apart a bit and it would stretch it. So it would make it longer. This one here, what it does, it pushes the metal together and actually squeezes metal into areas from the outside and pulls into the middle and shrinks it. It's literally changing the structure of the metal. So I want this panel that I have, I want this panel to curve this way. So I'm going to shrink it through the middle a couple of times. You can overwork this, you can get carried away and change it quite quickly. So let's have a look. We'll see how well you can see this. If we look down the face of that, and if I grab the ruler without knocking the camera over, if we look down the face of that, that actually, through the bending process, it's actually curved a little bit the opposite direction. So I need to shrink it back just to get it straight. So you might be able to see a gap through here. So in the first place, I need to try to bring it back to straight. So I'll just do this a few times. The other way. Now firstly, let's see whether we've managed to make it straight. Okay, definitely better. There's only about 2 mil in the middle here now. Haven't touched the outside bit yet, it was just the middle I was working on. It's got jaws that grab it and literally pull the steel towards each other. Okay, let's see. I think we've got a bit of curvature happening to it now. Oh yeah, so this end is more obvious. There's nothing on this end, but this end has definitely got some curvature. So I'll work on this end a bit. Again, I don't want to overdo it. I can stretch it back again, but I don't want to go too far if I can avoid it. Okay, got about an 8 mil gap there and about a 3 mil gap there, so I'll give it a bit here. see a nice curve coming into it now. Oh yeah, I've got probably 15 mil here and 15 mil at the other end. So I think what we'll do, we'll compare it to the back of the car. Now, if we look along here, let me grab my straight edge. If we look along where the boot closes, if I do it on this side, it's probably more obvious. You can see I've got it touching here, and I've got it touching at the other end. And in the middle here, there is, what do we got? 20 mil. So there's curvature of 20 mil through there. So I don't know what I've got so far, but I'll hold the panel in place and we can see. I didn't say my other tripod broke, so I'm using a dodgy little thing that wants to fall over all the time. With that sitting in place, just sitting on top there, there's a little bit of a gap. Now just with a gentle push, I can get that to touch. So I'm just going to shrink it a little bit more, and then I reckon that'll be about where we need it. So I'm really happy with the way that's come up. So I'm just holding the ruler there for reference, but you can see through the middle here, I can't hold a ruler there at the same time, but I got about 20 mil there. So it's got a nice natural curve happening to it through there. You can probably see that. So that will duplicate the curve across there quite nicely. So I'm going to take the floor out, I think. We'll lift it so that I can set this piece in and start. I've got to cut some shape into it on the sides. That's fitting in there well so far. So this flange just here, it's sitting on top of the original flange or part of the old floor, just there. And the same over there, which is on top of the rail as well. And it's got the curvature in it. Now the idea is that I'm going to, it probably needs to be cut down maybe 5 mil, I'd say. But it'll be welded in like that. So where the point is that I'm going to weld it, it hasn't got this little dip in it here, so it's a pretty flat plane. Same through over here. So that's the idea there. And then from this side, you can see that this is where it folds under, so that's where it's going to hold the boot floor up. It's following the curvature nice. Got the panel at the back here, which I've still got to fit in. But then once that's in there, then I've got things to be able to fix other things too, put spot welds in and so on. It's nice and strong. Now the question I'm asking myself is, do I bead roll in some shapes like this into it? And I'm not sure. I don't think I'm going to. Would probably look okay, but I don't think I'm going to do it. I think it's just an added layer of work that I don't really need to give myself. So I just need to do some trimming up on the sides here. So I'll trim that up to where I want it to be, and then we'll have a look at that. I spent a few minutes just working out where I was going to cut it around these holes, and the more I thought about it, these ones here, these sunken bits, the more I thought about it, the more I thought I should just leave the sheet as a big rectangle and reform these holes and cut the whole section out there rather than work around that. I was just trying to save myself some effort, but I think it's going to be wiser to cut it out. So what I've got, I'll show you on the other side because it's not quite as damaged. But what we have is this circle. It's about 55 to 60 millimeters in diameter from side to side. So it sticks in, it's indented, I guess, about 10 mil here. And I think if the bottom of it was still there, it was probably pretty much flush. So it's on an angle to the back panel, I guess is what I'm saying. So I've transferred the center of this onto my pieces over here. So what I did, this is where I was going to cut it out and everything, so ignore all that, none of it matters anymore. but I put a hole, I marked it, that was the center of that hole just there, and the one on the other side, and then the dent needs to go on this side, so it needs to be deeper on this part and pretty much no depth to it there, and that's the center of the hole. Ignore everything else. That's the center of the hole. So what I need to do is mark out where it's going to go and then work out some way of pressing it. So I'll mark it out. I like to pick up any pieces of metal that I can find lying around anywhere that I think can be useful. So all of the things here, essentially, I use to press circles or dents or things like that. This one here, internally, is about the size that I need, I think. So if we have a look in here, if I sit that in there, is actually a pretty good fit. So that is what I'm going to attempt to use. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my sheet metal between something. So let's say my hand was sheet metal, have it sitting on something like that, and then have this, and basically press the two together and try and form a dent. I'm sure I'll form a dent, but whether it's right. Now the tricky part with this is that I don't want it to be even, I want it to be deeper on one side than the other. So I'm not really sure how to do that. So I'm just going to play around with something and see if I can work it out. Okay, so off camera I just had to play around, and that is what I just did. And that is pretty much exactly what I need. And how I did it was I put the top piece in slightly off center to the bottom piece so that it grabbed one side and kept pushing into the other side. So I can do it in theory. All I've got to do is try and duplicate it exactly correctly on my piece. That's the challenge. Well, I got them done. Neither of them is perfect. Both of them is deep on the side as well as the top and not on the bottom, so a little bit off-centered. Interestingly, equally, so this is on the inside, this one's on the inside. It's almost like it's meant to be. I think I'm going to run with that because I think it will still serve the purpose. As long as I've done them right. They could probably be a little bit deeper, but I can't actually get them to go any deeper. So I think that's going to have to be it. I'm reasonably happy with that. So I cleaned the marking pen off. They're definitely not quite as deep as on the car, but they're not far off. They're pretty good. And I think that each of them is slightly out of center. It's a bit hard to tell. I think they're slightly out of center to where I marked out, but the squash of the steel might have caused that as well, because that does look like it's in the center of that larger circle. I think it'll be okay. Now, if you're wondering why I'm putting these in when I'm not worrying about the other bits, is I'm pretty sure that this is where the bumper bar bolts on. I presume it's so that a washer and a bolt can go through and not be sticking out into the boot area and into the boot trim too much. that's my guess. So yeah, I'll make the holes larger, and then other than a tiny little bit of trimming on the bottom, I think this thing is probably ready to go in. Got that Clecoat in place and clamped in place, and you can see how the boot floor comes up to it. So it'll give me some spots to plug weld it, and obviously I'll seam seal it once all that's done. This part here will be tapped in and welded into the part just here. There's actually weld there from when the floor was welded in by the last person, so it's a good solid thing to weld to. And this panel here, as I've said, I'll cut it down probably another 10 or 15 mil, and that way things like this, it's flat metal underneath that, so this little dent will still be there, but below that it'll just be a nice straight line right the way through. And a little bit of trimming needed here, but I'll do that once I take it back off again. So I've got it all Clecoat in place, everything there nice and solidly, so that will be, that's the advantage of Clecoat, so I can keep taking it off, putting it back into the same spot. I've actually got a Cleco hole there, maybe it popped out, no I took it out. So yeah, that's the advantage of those. So I'm going to leave that here for today because it's quite late and my neighbours really don't need me banging around at 11 o'clock at night. But that's what it looks like from the back there. This gap through here is a little bit uneven, but I think that'll come out in the wash. So this is what we're looking at the moment. That'll be cut off, that piece there. So I'm very happy with it. It'll be nice and solid. Won't look very different to you, but I've gone through and I've given everything that is going to matter a good cleanup. As I said previously, the rails, inside the rails, has got a little bit of dirt, but they're in good condition. So everything I can get to, anything I'm going to be welding over the top of, I've ground clean as flat as I can and so on. What I'm going to be doing on any areas where I'm going to be overlapping metal that I can't get to later is coating it with this copper rich weld through primer. So areas like here and pieces that are going to be covered, so the bottom of this and so on, top of the rails, all that sort of stuff will be painted. And then there'll be areas on this as well, so I'll probably do this, this part here and a couple of pieces on this anyway. And anything else that isn't going to be welded on top of, but is going to be covered, I'm just going to use normal red primer. Why? Because I've only got so much weld through primer and I've got more red primer. So I'll use weld through where I need to weld through, and I'll use the red where I just want to cover stuff. But other than that, once I've got that done, then I'll be ready to put this piece in. Weld through primer in the weld through primer areas. Including a little bit on the bottom here and the bottom there, where it's going to be sitting on top of a spot just there, and a spot just there. And then this panel on the inside part that I won't be able to get to later, I've done. And this is the boot side, I'm not worried about that. So just some red primer there. And I've just cleaned off around the perimeter. And I've cleaned, part of my process, everywhere where I'm going to be welding, I've cleaned, wax and grease removed, and even on the underside. Because what I don't want is things like body deadener and old paint and rust and stuff sucking up into my weld and contaminating it. So I've tried to make it as clean as I possibly can. So you can only do what you can do. So that's ready to go back on. What I'm going to do is, I've shown you what I'm going to be replacing, but what I'm going to do is go through and cut out a lot of the bulk in the first place. So a lot of the stuff, all this sort of stuff, I'll cut it out, remove it. I've got Cleco marks in this, or holes in this, and on my panel, so I can put it in exactly the same spot where it is, because I won't have reference points otherwise. So I'll leave some of those Cleco points as little tabs. And that way, because I'm going to be doing a cut and butt, and what that is, I'm going to be welding it and cutting it and welding it and cutting it and welding it and cutting it, and then the piece that I cut off I'll be able to pull out from the back side here. So you'll see that as I go if you haven't seen cut and butt method before. But I just want to relieve as much as I can in the first place. So that's what I'm going to do. Got to cut out the bulk, leave some areas to contact to, and then we can weld it in. Once again, I'm sitting in the boot of the car. Sorry about all the noise, I got the fan on, it's really hot here. Cut and butt. I have got the pat, so that there, that clean metal there, that's actually the existing boot, and this is my new panel. So what I did, I cut it out, I just ran the angle grinder through the new metal and the old metal at the same time to create a line, the width of the angle grinder blade, which is about 1 millimetre. And then you can see up here, I've started cutting and then stopped, but if I bend this out of the way, you can see I've got a nice neat 1 millimetre cut, and I can go through and just tack it, so I just make it so they're lined up, push it in, push it out, so that it's lined up, and then tack it, and then tack it. So I'm going along, I'm doing a bit, then I'm going to cut a bit more, tack a bit more, cut a bit more, tack a bit more, and so on. So this piece will become waste, and what will happen is that the piece from behind that I'm cutting through, I'll be able to remove it from the back and peel it out. And in fact, that's part of it there. So you can only do this method if the piece that you're cutting through, so the original piece, if you can get it out from somewhere. You can't do this method if you can't get access to remove it. So I'll just keep going along there and doing that, and just slowly. So I'm going along about every inch, every 25 pil, and tacking, and just going a bit at a time. Too much heat, it'll distort it. Down here, there was a bit of a hole there, and there was a little bit of contamination, so it sort of built up with a bit of cocky shit weld, but I'll grind that off, it'll be okay. So I'll show you the rest of the process here, but in the first place, I'm going to cut it out, tack it in, and then I'll worry about welding it. If you haven't done much welding on bodywork, don't worry about the fact that it's individual spots, one after the other after the other. A lot of people get stressed out about how ugly their weld looks. Okay, it shouldn't look terribly ugly, but it's not a fillet. You're not doing a continuous weld when you're doing this sort of stuff, unless you're absolutely unbelievably good TIG welder, but otherwise you do this up, or you're going to end up with a heap of distortion. So I'll go along, I'll show you, I'll bring you back once I've done all of that and I've started actually doing the welding. Meanwhile, this is Todd in the boot. I haven't got across there yet, I figured I'd stop and show you this. So again, as I was saying, now I've gone through and cut through here, and you can see I can push this in to get it right. So I've just got to make sure that it aligns. It's important if you're doing this method that you make sure that everything fits nicely before you go through and cut, because if you just try and push it to get the two pieces to come together by forcing them, then that's going to cause its own distortion anyway. So what we also have is the piece at the back here. So this piece here, that's the piece that I'm cutting off, including the little tab that will hold my electrical loom I've just noticed. So that's the bottom of this piece, and on the ground just there is the piece that I've cut off through here. So again, tack, 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 and away we go. got it all tacked in, and then I've gone through and I've just started laying a few dots of weld down. Generally speaking, I do 3 tacks. So let's say I find this one, then I'll do a weld half over the top of it, then another one half over the top of it, then another one half over the top of it, do 3, and then I walk along a bit and do another spot and do another spot and so on. And the idea is trying not to put too much heat into any part of the panel. Sometimes you get carried away, you go, oh, there's only another 2 to do, so I'll just close up the joint, and that's pushing your luck. So some people like to do 3 welds and then get an air blower and cool it down. Other people like to do a few welds and then put a damp cloth on it. I've done all those methods, and air blowing is something that I'll do on the outside, but in here I'm not particularly concerned, but I don't want it to distort. So what I'm going to do now is just continue to do that. Some people also like to go through and just run a flat disc or a grinding wheel or something over the top of their welds at this point in time to flatten them out and then build on, so that you're not building weld on top of weld. I'm not going to do that yet. What I'm going to do is I'll go through and I'll do some here, etc., and then eventually join them up. And the idea is by going over the top of the previous one and then over the top of that one, then over the top of that one, then you're trying to avoid pinholes. Sometimes you just completely miss the spot, but that's another thing. Another thing really helpful with any welding is to actually be able to see. It's amazing. I was the same. A lot of people say I have a lot of trouble seeing, and if you can't see, you can't weld. It's as simple as that. So a light on the subject. I changed my glasses so that I've got really good close-up glasses with this, and just as much visibility as you can. Anyway, I'm going to keep going through welding that, try and control the heat, and then once I've done that, then I'll come back and grind it, check the pinholes, go over it again, grind it, and theoretically we're there. I guess it's that time of year again. Christmas, when the fire brigade and all the emergency services go out cheering everyone's life up, asking for donations, which, you know, I'm always happy to give. Good on them, they do a great job. It's a stinking hot day today, I wouldn't want to be them. But it could be a lot worse, I guess. Merry Christmas, guys. So we have that all welded up. As I said, don't expect anything pretty. You're not trying to lay rows of dimes here, as they say. So what I've gone through and done all that. I've filled in some of my Cleco holes as well. Don't forget to do those. So the next thing to do is to go through and grind that off, check for pinholes, and then just do that again. Now the idea is when you're grinding, only grind the weld. Don't grind the metal on either side of it. It'll just thin it. You'll end up with a fatigued weld and it'll crack. So I'm just going to go through. I use a variety of different discs, but one of the things that I do is I use, where's an angle grinder? I use the tip of the disc. So if it's curved, which they are, then I use that very tip, and I'll show you that, how I lay it, or how I use the tip of it to grind it. But let's have a look on the outside here. So as I said, the cut and butt method, come on, focus. The cut and butt method, this is the piece that is coming out. So you can see that's the back of the weld, just there. And this piece stuck down there, but that'll come out after I cut this bit out to do that pocket. But you can see this is the back of my dimples there, the holes lined up really nicely. And other than the fact that it's stuck there, I'll be able to get it out. Now if I was to shine a light behind there, no doubt I'd see some holes, but you can see there's penetration. And the idea is that 1mm angle grinder width, using your weld and a nice hot heat and going in just dabbing it, as I was saying, on top, there's holes just there, you get penetration. You can see there's penetration because you've got weld on the opposite side of the metal. That's what you want. You're joining it together, not just welding on top of it, you're actually fusing them together. So I'll worry about taking this out in a little bit, but I'll get onto the grinding stage. That's the fun bit, isn't it? Yeah, everyone loves jumping on an angle grinder. But I'll go through, grind that, tack it up, and I'll bring you back. Actually, I'll show you some of the grinding. It's going to be hard for me to show you this while I'm actually doing it, so I'll show you in theory. So I'm going to use a variety of discs. So I might use a flap disc, for example, and that's a 36 or 40 grit, whatever it is, doesn't say on it, it's coarse. And when I go through with that, then I'll go through and just use the very tip of the wheel there. So get my light in the right place. Here's the very tip of the wheel there. So just the very apex of it, and just grind through. And once I see that I'm contacting the metal on either side, then I stop. Now the steeper you have it, so if it's flat, I'll go through, I change the angle a lot, so I'll go through and I'll do a lot of flat to take off the bulk of it, the mountains, and then the closer I get to the surface, then I'll tilt it. But then I've also got my Rolox, so these little guys I've shown you before, 36 grit, nice tight little apex. I can get in there really well, get into tighter spots, and so on. So you can use them flat, but you can use them on the edge as well. Obviously you use the edge, you wear the edge out and you've got the flat, but try and use a combination of, when you've got a lot of metal you can use the flat, and when you're trying to prevent cutting into the metal on either side, the parent metal, use the tip. Now another thing I do, I sometimes use actual angle grinder grinding discs, but I like using the cutting disc as well. Now these aren't grinding discs, so you don't use the face of it to grind with, but you can use the tip. So I don't mind going through, and once again, actually very steadily holding it and going through and grinding off like this. And this is a nice small disc which I've left on there, so I can get into tighter spots. So I can get into a nice tight spot down in here and do it. Sometimes I might use a die grinder, like I used to grind the rust out in the back window, in the front window. So I guess in a nutshell, don't be a tightwad. Use good sharp cutting and sanding discs. You'll save a lot of time, and use a variety of things. Someone said, I can't think of what it was, you can never have too many cutting and grinding tools, and I couldn't agree more. So I'm going to get in there, I'm going to grind all that down, get covered in dust and get hot and burn myself with the sparks, but I'll show you once it's done. To move you guys because you're sort of in my way, but what you can see here is not ground, and then ground almost perfectly flat. Now one of the key, so you can see here a couple of, they're actually Cleco holes that I missed, but you can see a couple of pinholes here. One of the keys to getting this so that you can grind it flat without going into the metal on either side is that panel alignment. So when you're doing the cut and butt, the importance of getting the two pieces of metal, this one and this one, on the same plane so that they're not overlapping is super important. So you cut it, get them spot on, tack it, get them spot on, tack it. If you leave it, if it's like a quarter of a millimetre, just a tiniest little bit out of whack, then when you're grinding, you'll start grinding into one metal before the other, and you won't be able to get it so that it's almost invisible weld. Now I could go along here with some body filler or some seam sealer or something like that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do because I don't know what the boot liner looks like, but I'm going to do something just to tidy it up. But you can see areas where I have started but haven't finished, areas where I haven't done at all, and areas that I'm really not going to grind anymore because I will start getting into the parent metal. So I'm going to keep going doing that, and I'll show you once it's all done. Okay, I've got that all ground up, so I went over it with the flap disc and then quickly went over it with the mini die grinder with the little Rolox on it. So you can see there's a couple of little holes, one there, maybe one or two there. Holes that I hadn't filled in, and a couple there, and other than that, that's it. I'm exceptionally happy with the way that's come up. It's a very hard camera angle to show you, but that is, other than literally maybe 10 little dots of weld and 30 seconds of grinding, that's done. And then I can jump onto the outside. Now that is nice and solid, and it's got a support for the boot floor now. So, very happy. Once again, that's those dimples. All done. I've been playing around with the back panel, the first panel that I made up, and I've got it tacked in place there. So just along the top, a little bit of finessing, but it was pretty good. And I've drilled the holes in the middle of these plates that you saw me make, and I've got those coming through. I've got bolts coming through the locating holes there. And the reason I've got that is that those bolts are almost identical. They are exactly the same size as the holes that I've drilled. So I'm going to position these where I need them to be, and then I might even put a locating cleco in them just to hold them in place, and I'll mark around what I'm going to cut, where I'm going to cut. So I'd say this one I'll cut off down there and leave this piece, and then on the other side I look like I'm going to be welding this straight onto that, because obviously I've got this piece offset. It's not centered or something, not really sure, I can't remember. Yeah, it's a bit longer on this side, so that's okay. I'll cut it, I'll mark it out, cut it, tack it in place, and then what I'll do, I'll actually position it on the car and then start tacking it there. And that's right, I've got to trim this side off over here as well. There's parts behind here that I'm going to be leaving, and there's parts that I'm going to be getting rid of. So I want it to run down on this part just here, and I think I was going to run along here. I actually can't remember where I was going to go. So I'll work that out, but it'll tag back in to over here, and it'll cut it up through there, and it should come up okay. And then obviously I've still got to remove this piece, and I took out the piece from behind there, but there's still just a little bit caught behind there that I've got to remove as well. But I'll be honest, I've pretty much had it for today, so I think I'm going to wrap it up and get back onto this next time. On the right hand side here, I'm just marking out where this pocket's going to be installed, and just off camera I bent this edge down a little bit so that it'll match this and tuck into this. And I've also just flared out this corner just right here, just so that it'll blend into that. Now this will be welded down through here, and I'll be able to grind it, but it means that it's not going to be, this isn't going to be open on the end. What I have just done is scribbled all around the margin of where the patch piece is going to go, just with some Sharpie marker, and then I grabbed a scribe, so this guy, I grabbed that and just scratched around the outside. You could use a nail, you could use anything sharp. The reason I did that, I've now got that very accurate mark, because I don't want to make a mistake and cut too much out here. So I'm going to go through with my angle grinder and maybe my air saw and just cut just on the inside edge of that, like not too much on the inside. I just don't want to, I want to leave the line behind, but only just. And then I can trim either the patch panel or this just with a sander or something if I need to, because I want it to get really snug fit with a 1mm gap right the way around so that I can weld it in. I can't cut and butt here because I can't get this piece out later, so I need to cut it out and remove it, and then I'll be able to finish getting that piece out that was stuck in there before. And once again, that's my reference marks, and so is the hole in the middle there, so I shouldn't have too much trouble getting it back together. I did realise that I haven't painted behind this panel. I forgot, so I'm going to have to try to just leave it out and spray some primer in there. That was a bit of a faux pas on my part. So I'll cut this and then we'll have a look at it. Something I've just been playing around with a bit here is the actual shape on the edges. So you might be able to see how I've sort of rolled the edges on this panel in various directions and put little swages in it and so on, and that is so that it blends in with all the different shapes. It wasn't as flat on the edges as what I thought it was, so I've got to get it to blend in here and up here and so on. What I found was it was fitting really nicely. Well, it seemed to be, but then I realised it was sitting out about 10mm from here, and on the original version the two pieces inner and outer were touching. So when I put that in there like that, you can see it's sitting out. I've still got to push that bit of metal in, but it looks more extreme there than what it is, but it was pretty bad. So one thing I am going to have to do is I'm going to just put a washer just there, just as a spacer, so that when I do the bumper bar bracket up, assuming that's what it is, that it doesn't crush the two panels together and crack the paint and distort it and all the rest of it. And that little bit there, that half a mil or whatever it is, maybe a mil, that will just give me enough push outwards to be able to get all these things to contact in. Now, why that's resulted, partially because of the shape, but I think partially also because this isn't as deep as it was originally, and what I made here isn't as deep as what it was originally. So that resulted in a gap between them. In hindsight, pretty obvious that was going to happen, but yeah, hindsight's great. So, and as you can see, I've cleaned this up. So I'm going to put some primer behind this, and I'll put some primer on that, and then I think I'll start tacking that one in place before I tackle that one. Looking pretty good. So I've got that just tacked into place as it is at the moment. So what I do, I get parts that are going to line up and I tack them, and then if I need to, I just get a little screwdriver or lever or something and lever various things in or out. So there is a little bit of difference here. There's a lip, this is raised up a little bit just here, but I'm going to put plenty of weld in there and I'll be able to grind that off and it'll be fine. But this part is sitting half a mil higher than this part. And there's I know that's just a large gap. So yeah, it's coming up really well. So I've managed to, what I do if something is needs a little bit of shaping, I'll weld right next to it. So let's say just here, I might have welded right next to it, and then I can just tap it with a hammer and tap a little bit of shape into it. While there's some heat in the metal, it actually makes it just contour a little bit more as well. So I did that there. So as I said, I welded that washer in from the back. I primed all this stuff from the back as well. So that's all good. And I cut the bottom of this off. That cut on the car is a little bit average, but I'm pretty sure that I should be able to do it. So it's a large gap here, small gap here, and so on. I just cut it to tack it in place just to get this in place. I'll probably cut that tack off and get that really neat. But before I worry about that, I'm actually going to jump on this side and do the same as I did on that side. Quite some time later, I've got that side in. That side was actually a bit fiddly to sort out, but it's in. And as you can see, I've burnt in right the way across the top and down the side and got that little panel in as well. The only thing I've done on the bottom is a spot there, and that was just to hold it in place. I intentionally didn't weld along the bottom yet because I sort of figured that if I try to weld the top and the bottom, I'm going to have heat coming from both directions, and I think that inevitably would have caused warpage. So I will cut that spot weld, tack that tack, and then I'll go through and I'll neaten up the joint there, and I'll slowly and calmly work my way across. But I think I'm pretty good as far as distortion goes. There's a few folds and so on in this, so I think there's a fair bit of structure holding it together. But I'm pretty happy with the way it's coming up, I have to say. Once it's ground, it'll be good. They always look ugly, don't they? You might be wondering how long it's taking me to do this. So I've lost count, but I'm up to maybe 5 or 6 days. So there's a fair bit involved in it. So yeah, would it have been cheaper to get replacement panels? No, it wouldn't have, because I'm not actually losing any money by doing this. But if you were paying someone by the hour, then yeah, this would be costing you a fortune. So I couldn't get panels, as I've explained earlier, so I decided to make them, and I'm happy with the way it's coming out. But it's a very time-consuming process, there's no doubt about it. So hand-making panels is hand-making panels. That's why things are mass-produced. Anyway, so I've gone through and done the first grind on most things there, and I've started spotting in the bottom, tacking in the bottom. What I did there was a bit of a rough edge along the existing, and it was also thin in spots. So I've tacked it over here, and I probably won't uncut that, but along here what I've been doing is tacking it, and then it's sort of like a cut and butt, but it's not really a cut and butt. I'm just trimming up the joint. So this joint here where it's overlapping on the bottom and the gap's a bit tight, I'm just running the angle grinder through the weld, going through a bit, getting it nice, and then tacking it back together, and I'm ending up with this. And I'm doing the weld right on the change of shape of the panel. So when I grind it, I'll grind one surface, grind the other surface, and I'll worry about the actual tip, the apex, at the very end, just to give it a little bit of round on it like that. So I'll put plenty of weld on there without distorting it, but plenty of weld so that I've got something to grind off. Now up here, looks pretty ugly on the camera, doesn't look that much better in real, but the reality is that that's all metal. I haven't gone through and fixed up the pinholes and things yet, but the reality is it's all metal. There's nothing else there. So I'll go through, fix the pinholes, I'll grind it a little bit. I've got a little bit of panel work to fix and so on, but the reality is there's going to be body filler over it. So that is just the way it is. There's going to be body filler over it. I'm not trying to metal finish this. I'm not that kind of I'm not a craftsman. So I'll be body filling it, and quite frankly, that's the way most body work is done anyway. But the reality is that, or the important thing is that there's not pinholes. So there are still pinholes there. And what I'll do, I'll go through and I'll epoxy it, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to put some fiberglass reinforced body filler over it to try and waterproof the gap, because I can't get into it from the back either anymore. And then I'll do the rest of the body fill and so on, same as I will with the rest of the body. So it'll have more epoxy and so on. So it'll build up, but it will be a waterproof all metal seal with a skim of body filler over it. So I'm very happy with the way it's coming up. All done. So I've just sanded it up with some 80 grit on a DA sander, just so it makes it look pretty. Certainly not finished entirely, but it's ready for epoxy and then ready for body work. Could it be better? Yeah, sure it could. Could it be done in a different way? Yeah, probably. But am I happy with it? 100%. So I just got to do the boot floor now, which I'm not looking forward to because it feels like sore back territory to me. But do that and then the back of this is done. Well, I figure if it's not ready now, it's never going to be ready. So this is the boot floor. I've gone through and drilled in 27 million holes for plug welds to go on. Some of them might contact where they're meant to, and those that don't, I'll just have to fill back in again. This is what I did it with. So a step drill, and I've just gone into the second hole, the 1, 2, 3, third hole. So it gives about a, I don't know, 6 mil hole, 1/4 of an inch, I guess. So I've got everything prepped as much as I can. I've got to do a bunch of repairs along the top there, but that can come after I put the floor in. Everything's epoxied. No, it's not. Everything's copper primed. So I think I'm ready. As ready as I'm going to be. I'm expecting a couple of headaches, but we'll get it done. Well, we've done really well. I'm going to leave this video here and I'll show you where I've got up to. The job's not quite finished, but the video's getting really long and I think you get the idea. So if you've hung around this long, well done to you, because it's a lot of video. But I'll show you what I've done. So I've got that all spotted in right the way through and got that edge tucked nicely up against there. What do I need to do? I've got to finish this edge here, right along the edge, and then that part through there, and then the same around here. Unfortunately, that's where it had been welded previously, and it's all pretty butchered, so that was my headache area. So I'm going to be chasing that for a while. it's not going to be a very enjoyable video, and it's really not worth showing you, quite frankly. But what else did we get done? Super happy with that. Happy with that. And happy with that. So other than that little bit of welding, and I've got to do a couple of spot welds to hold a couple of things on underneath. But other than that, all of that rust in the back of the car is done. So we're all primed inside. I'm going to go and buy some supplies from the Big Smoke tomorrow, and then I can get all of the back of this into epoxy ready for that next stage. And I don't know what I'm going to do next. I might have to tackle the front, I guess. This body work wise, as far as major work goes, there's really not a lot to do. Like, there's paint stripping, there's epoxying, and there's small dents. But the next major thing is really this bent front. So we'll have a look at that. I think I'm going to smooth the other engine bay too. I think I'm going to go down that path. So thank you. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope you enjoyed my company. I've enjoyed your company. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And once again, if you think you know anyone that might like this, please show them. Ask them to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and plenty of comments. I love them. So take care, pick up an angle grinder and cut something. Stay safe.